Thank you so much for coming in. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, David, first of all.
So happy to be here.
First day of Nepal, let's start off with that. How was the experience of being here for the first time?
First day in Nepal was my first day in South Asia. I'd never been to the region before, and it was, the full Kathmandu experience of chaos and confusion and beauty and just awe. And it's been a year. And like I was just saying to you before we started, every day I know a little bit less. So a lot to learn.
And I will say this right away, that you love motorcycles and you ride motorcycles to work. That's what I heard. I don't know how true that is.
It is true. My office does not love me for it, but I do ride my bike from up in Bulan Ilkanta, where I live, to the office every day. Maybe a little less in monsoon season when a little afraid of the rain.
This is amazing, right? The head of World Bank rides a motorcycle in Kathmandu almost every day. Whenever you can to work.
Yeah, sure. Why not? You got to, breathe the fumes. We're working a lot on air pollution these days. Air quality is a huge challenge here. I live it every day. Get stuck behind one of those buses, and it's a rough ride into the office.
Oh man, we're gonna get it better, and then we're gonna get into electric motorcycles.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Huge challenge for the country.
All right, let me go ahead and get started. There's one thing that I wanted to start off by asking you, that you've traveled the world, you've seen the world from almost every continent you've been to, if I'm not mistaken. Almost every. Being in Asia, let's start off with that. Asia overall, I'm just gonna touch base on 3 specific countries, starting off with the country that I was born in, obviously Sri Lanka, and then Maldives as well.
Yeah.
Since July last year, if I'm not mistaken, how has the overall experience been for the past 13 months?
Well, it's been incredible. I sort of pinch myself every day. Because who would have thought that me, some kid from Washington, D.C., would get sent by the World Bank to be the country director for these 3 so different places, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and get to live here and experience it and learn it. So it's been an incredible experience, and a moment in time when the sort of economic center of the world is shifting this way, right?
Asia, yes.
Exactly. It's here now. Here in Nepal, in between these 2 giant superpowers, has on the one hand this incredible challenge of navigating that, but what an incredible opportunity, especially as these 2 countries, India and China, are so emergent. So, and that I think really does define so much of the dynamic in South Asia, and creates challenges, but real opportunities for countries like Maldives, Sri Lanka.
So let's jump into it. Gaining a lot from these 2 giants. What are the things that we could go ahead and grasp right away, instantly? Some things that we haven't done yet.
Well, look, it's very easy to talk about what hasn't happened, but we got to start by talking about the kind of incredible transformation that's happened in Nepal in the last 20, 25 years. This is a country, we were just talking about this before, this country has reduced poverty faster than almost any country in human history. And that is something that is remarkable. I know that a lot of us, especially in this day of Instagram and social media, we're looking abroad, we're looking at other places and saying, well, it could be, look how much better things are, keeping up with the Joneses, as we say, in colloquial Americanism. But in reality, this country has transformed itself in an amazing way. Now, you look at India and China and what they've done in infrastructure particularly. I think if there's one thing to take away, there's many things to take away, but the transformative power of investing in infrastructure, connectivity, the digital infrastructure of the future. I think, if I was in charge of Nepal and had one thing to sort of focus on, it would probably be that. It's one thing, you see the quality of infrastructure in India today is radically different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, I think, and that's been in part because of it's become a real effort by the public sector to do that, real thoughtful ways to engage with the private sector, something that I think Nepal has a lot to learn from and a little bit more to do. But yeah, and then you look at things like, the use of the digital ID, the way that digital infrastructure has transformed the delivery of public services in places like India. I mean, these are things that I think really are the challenges for the next decade in the country.
I was recently in Africa, I was in Egypt, and we were talking about that earlier as well. I realized that so many different countries that I go to, and I realized that we have grasped just the digital economy so fast. QR codes, we're using digital payments everywhere.
Amazing.
In other places, I had to carry a lot of cash, but here, I generally don't. This is the only thing that we need.
It's not just digital payments, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got companies like Cloud Factory, like Incessant Rain,
Fuse machine.
right? Fuse machines that everybody talks about. I mean, Nepal exported nearly $1 billion in IT services last year. And that number is up from something close to zero just a few years before. And there's more stuff going on that I surely don't know about and that most of us don't know about. You've got some outsourcing going on, some business process outsourcing, some back office things happening. So there's a lot of dynamism in that digital economy space that I think us old guys, you're a young guy, but us old guys, a little bit less familiar with and in touch with. And the speed at which this digital-driven economy can actually, create economic activity and jobs is really remarkable, right? It takes a long time to build the irrigation systems, and it takes a long time to build roads.
Infrastructure, yeah.
Those things take a long time, but wow, the speed at which the digital economy can turn itself around is something remarkable.
Let's talk about that then. Let's start off with that. I want to talk about the CPF, the Country Partnership Framework that the World Bank started. It's $2.7 billion, give or take.
Give or take, around just below three. So we've made a kind of a long-term commitment to Nepal. We've been
How long is it for?
7 years.
Okay.
And we've been partners with Nepal for 60 years or so. But we've trying to pilot new ways to operate in the World Bank a little bit, making sort of longer-term, more strategic sort of visions of how we want to engage. So we made this sort of 7-year, around $3 billion commitment on both the public sector side, but also the private sector side. So the World Bank, you probably know, we're both the World Bank, the IFC, and MIGA, our insurance branch, our political backstopping branch, making this kind of long-term commitment around some real strategic issues. So what we've tried to do is say that we're going to be a little bit more selective, do a little bit fewer things, but go a little bit bigger and harder, and really focus in Nepal on what we think are the two biggest challenges for the country, and that's creating growth that creates jobs through the private sector, and also preparing for those inevitable natural disasters, making the country more resilient to natural events. That we're now here 10 years from the 2015 earthquake, and I think all of us are afraid that the next one will be just as bad or worse. And so really trying to make those upstream investments to reduce risk and make those events a little bit less terrible. So those two kind of fundamental pillars around job creation and resilience are sort of what we're focused on. But I just want to say that our job at the World Bank, we're a member-owned development cooperative. We're not a bilateral. We're not an NGO. Our job is to support the government and the people in Nepal in the things that they think are important, and see how we can work with them to make those things happen.
And let me go a little bit back. Since 61 to 25, I just want to touch base on just a few things over the past 6 decades. I was reading up on a lot about, I'll get to the CPF shortly. I was reading up on the Nuakot solar power station, the 24 megawatt, which had happened back in the day. That was fantastic. And I was reading up on the electricity supply, which 2025 basically you supported with $257 million US for the electric supply as well. And for the 4 provinces, that's something that I was reading up on. I'm just trying to touch base on the few things that the World Bank has supported us with. I really like the Rani Zamara irrigation system that supported a lot of farmers. A lot of farmers, right? And then the bridges that the World Bank supported us with, funded over 90 bridges. That's something that I was reading up on as well, and that was on transportation. With education as well, again, more than 50,000 students almost 50,000 students got scholarships over a span of a decade. So that was something that I really like that as well. Farming, again, more than helped over 250,000 farmers and so many different things, right? One thing that struck with me, and I want to start off with the country partnership framework that I want to touch base on, is climate. We talk about climate. I've seen the change that has happened in various parts of the world with the industrialization that started, before my time. We here are in the forefront of it. Again, I talk with a lot of mountaineers. Our ice caps are melting. We talk about that constantly in my show. Let's talk about the CPF, how it's supporting when it comes to climate change. Let's start with that, if that's okay with you.
No, fantastic. Look, climate, the changing climate is going to affect all of us. And as the Honorable Prime Minister reminded me the last time I spoke to him, Nepal is at the forefront of that. It is a country of mountains, and a warming planet is definitely. And we're seeing it, right? I mean,
with our own eyes,
we're seeing it. I think what is really important at this stage for Nepal is a tiny emitter. And I mean, it is a tiny part of the problem, and it is going to suffer a lot of the consequences of climate change. So really, making sure that as we're talking about climate change, that we really do focus on, for Nepal, on that adaptation agenda. So one, you can look at adaptation and disaster risk management. We talked a little bit about disasters just now. As really two sides of the same coin. So making sure that we're really focused on making those investments to reduce those floods are going to happen. Those glacier lake outbursts. We just saw this glacier lake outburst on the Chinese side with these devastating impacts in the last few months. Making sure that we're building the infrastructure that can continue to provide services and deliver for the people has got to be the number one challenge for the country.
And that's something that the World Bank's definitely looking towards focusing in the foreseeable future within the 7-year plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're big with that.
Absolutely. So again, two priorities, and one of them we are saying resilience to natural disaster. Yeah. That's another way of saying climate change adaptation. It's not just climate change adaptation, but we have serious earthquake risk in this country too. But
we shouldn't forget that.
We shouldn't forget.
Doesn't matter how much we don't want to talk about it.
I'm really ready to talk about it. That 2015 earthquake happened on a Saturday.
Yeah, at 12, give or take around 12.
Right, and so there were no kids in those schools. And had it happened on a Tuesday, when kids were in schools, we would be looking probably at a very, very different situation. Right, so. Making those investments today to make sure that our public infrastructure, where those kids are going to be in schools on, God forbid when the next one happens, I think really needs to be the priority in that space.
So again, renewable energy, I'll come to energy shortly.
Yeah.
Everything comes together because with the hydropower that we're building, with all the infrastructure that we're building, again, we always have a big risk when it comes to flooding or earthquakes or any kind of natural disaster. Everything goes hand in hand.
Yeah. But look, I mean, again, a little bit of glass half full story.
Yeah.
The transformation in the energy sector in Nepal in the last decade has been nothing short of remarkable. All of my predecessors, when I found out that I was getting this incredible job, the first thing they said to me from the people that had been here 10 and 15 years ago, be prepared for load shedding, brownouts, 15 hours a day of no power, and actually that's not the case at all in the vast majority of the country anymore. I rarely lose power in my house. I'm not sure about you, but right. So this has been a transformative story in the energy sector, one that's been built, on an institution, NEA, that's really performed incredibly well. Not not perfect by any, but so you've now got the basis, that's sort of fundamental base to build on. It's time to take advantage of it and make more of those investments in generation. You talk about hydropower, but also in other renewables. In transmission, so happy to see that MCC will remain in the country. I think that's a fantastic.
That's a big hit.
That's a fantastic victory for Nepal. Those cross-border transmission lines that are going to be, financed by that or funded by that, not financed, but funded by that, will make a huge difference in. If we think that exploiting this resource of renewable energy and hydropower is part of the growth story and part of the job creation story and part of the poverty reduction story for the country, then those critical, cross-border Transmission investments are part of it. And then you mentioned the recent operation that we've done with NEA just on the distribution side to make sure that quality of service continues to be high. So look, it's a great story. There's a lot more to be done. There's a draft energy bill, I think, in Parliament right now to try to address some of those institutional, legal, regulatory challenges of the 21st century. But you've got a great story on energy.
Yesterday, pull this up. New York Times came out with an article. I believe it was yesterday. I've shared it too. This is about Nepal adapting to EVs.
They quoted my buddy Arnaud. They quoted Arnaud from the ADB in it. I'm really proud of that. Yes, and I gave actually a similar interview with Fast Company.
Oh, yeah?
What an amazing story, right? Something like 75% of new four-wheelers in the country are EVs. And thanks so much. And how simple, sometimes this public policy stuff is complicated, right? Laws, regulations, institutions, legal frameworks, regulatory. But here it's very simple. Reduce that,
fossil fuels that we are getting.
Yeah, well, reduce the import duties on electric vehicle to close to zero. People will buy them. And so the impacts are not just in terms of emissions, which we care about emissions globally, but as I said, in Nepal small, but the air quality impacts in this city and in the Terai of having all these electric vehicles are noticeable. People tell me, the ones that were here 2-3 years ago, that you can see and feel a difference even today. So really remarkable story.
Coming back, trading with we have to trade with both the countries, both our neighbors. There's no shadow of a doubt in that. Getting the EVs in, right? Just an example. Getting the EVs in and cashing on that, and then banking on that for our own future. What's your thought process in that? That's EVs being just an example.
Well, Nepal in general needs to trade more. I mean, Nepal's biggest problem is it doesn't trade much stuff. You import stuff and you don't export much stuff. You don't make much stuff in Nepal. This is the biggest problem, right? Or the biggest challenge. Let's not call it a problem. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. There's, you've lost some competitiveness. I don't want to get nerdy into the economic stuff here, but you've lost competitiveness over time. You have a fixed exchange rate with the rupee. You've got effective exchange rate appreciation. You've got this massive infrastructure deficit in the country. It's a tough country to make stuff and export stuff from, and you're surviving. The country is surviving largely on remittances. It's surviving on sending Nepalis abroad and bringing back money home. So figuring out ways to actually trade more and export more is in some ways one of the biggest challenges the country has. Right.
Let's jump into it then. Job creation. I wanted to keep that for last, but again, let's switch to that straight up. When it comes to CPF as well, I was reading up on this is the main core highlight as well within the 7 years. And overall, let's say, creating jobs, creating more industries, creating more workforce, having more jobs.
Look, this is not something that David Sislen or the World Bank came up with for Nepal. This is Nepal's, I think. You speak to Nepalis, and I speak to a lot of them, not nearly as many as you do, but I speak to a lot of people. And this, I think, is the biggest challenge of the country. You have 2,000 young people per day leaving the country to work abroad. And I mentioned before, again, this is nerdy economics talk, but 25% of the national income of the country is coming from remittances. And that's a good thing. This is not a bad thing. Please I don't want your listeners or you to get me wrong. This is an amazing thing. It's been the lifeline of the country, but the country's going through a demographic transition. It's becoming more urbanized. There are going to be less babies to send abroad. And so finding ways now to make a dynamic economy that, keeps Nepalis at home is, I think, when you talk to the folks, the people, that's what you hear. And I've had this, like many people, I've fallen in love with Nepal. Right, all of us foreigners come to this place and somehow fall in love with it. And one of the things that strikes me is, I've worked so many places, but there's no people that I've met that are more family focused and family oriented than the Nepalis. I know it's maybe cliche to say this, but it is absolutely feels to be the truth. And I don't think Nepalis I don't think they're born and grow up thinking that they want to move to the Gulf or to Australia. So really, I think finding ways to let young Nepalis sort of make a future for themselves in the country is is absolutely critical. Now we're thinking, so then the question is, okay, how? And so a lot of much effort has been put on sort of supply side training, skilling efforts. And really, I think what we're talking to the government about, not on our own, talking to the government and partners in the private sector and civil society about is, okay, look, how do you match that with the demand side? How do you match it with the kind of regulatory framework that gets the regulatory framework, the laws, the institutions, the mentality, reducing corruption, all of those kind of things that make people actually want to make investments in the country, to take some of those remittances that they're getting from their family members abroad and not just fix their house, buy food, buy the scooter, buy the car, but actually take a bet on making an investment. And don't get me wrong, there is stuff going on. There is some exciting stuff going on, particularly in the digital space, which we talked about. But there needs to be a lot more.
There's no doubt on that. I want to ask you about, what do you think of the startup culture that we have?
Amazing. No, amazing. So I'm sure this is a bit cliche, but I went to visit my friend Kiran Joshi and his wife Deepa at Incessant Rain Studios. Right now, who would have thought that in a building in the middle of Kathmandu, they would be doing the CGI
for Disney,
Disney, the Matrix, Hollywood movies. Amazing, right? So it goes to show you there is this dynamism in the country among the youth, this incredible creativity and dynamism. And I think the question is now how to harness it and how to think about, there you go, how to think about how to make more of that happen in a more dynamic way. I think super important, super interesting.
Will World Bank work directly with startups? Is that a possibility down the road?
Yeah, so we have this, as I mentioned before, we have our IFC, the International Finance Corporation, is our private sector arm, and they work directly with the private sector, and they're looking to make more investments. If you've got good bankable investments in the startup space, in digital, in tourism, in hospitality, in energy, please come see the World Bank and our colleagues at the IFC in the same building at the Yak and Yeti Hotel, and we are looking to double down on Nepal.
That's great to hear. And the real sharks are there.
Exactly, where the real money is.
Where the real money is. Let me go ahead and pick your brain on industries. Over a span of let's say 2 decades, what has the research said, and where are the things that we are banking on when it comes to industries and creating thousands of jobs?
Yeah,
not just hundreds, but thousands of jobs.
So I think when we think about Nepal and think about what the opportunities are, we see 3 or 4 big buckets. Okay, so and these are pretty broad, but the first is tourism. Okay. So the tourism sector, Nepal is, sorry for a colloquial Americanism, but it's punching below its weight in terms of tourism. So I'll give you an example. Globally, every 7 tourists creates 1 job. And in parts of Nepal, we're working on Lumbini right now, it's 11 tourists create 1 job. So the tourists that are coming are spending less money, spending a shorter amount of time. And you know it. I don't need to. You can have a walk through Tamil one evening and see that you're a little bit trapped in a kind of low-level equilibrium with tourism. And so this, finding ways to get more tourists to come for longer and spend more money at maybe a higher level of tourism is a critical opportunity for the country. So tourism, I think many of us at the World Bank think that tourism is a space where Nepal can do much better.
How did Maldives bank on that?
I mean, incredible story, right? I mean, Maldives now has a GDP and this is a 20-year transformation of a country, has a GDP per capita of $13,000, 10 times the GDP per capita of Nepal. And they did it, I think, by being very smart about bringing the private sector, being very good at marketing, and by offering, by really targeting that high end. They made a decision similar to Botswana. I used to live in Southern Africa, so Botswana is a bit of a similar situation by making a decision that chasing numbers is one thing, but really finding that chasing that higher level, higher spend tourist is part of the solution. That was what they decided. Given this incredible natural beauty that they have and these incredible endowments, would be central to their strategy. So that combination of making the investments, bringing the private sector. They're just finalizing the expansion of an airport, which is really going to, I think, help them significantly. And
this is with the Maldives.
In the Maldives,
Okay.
and being very smart about the marketing piece. So tourism is one bucket, but I don't want to just talk about tourism.
Okay.
I think you asked about industry. The digital industry of the future is got to be a piece of the strategy, and this is a place where I think where Nepal can do more. Right, thinking both about the digital infrastructure it needs. Connectivity is good, but still some investments to do there. But making sure that the space. I'm really pleased to see the government's made some efforts now to liberalize the flow of money in and out of the country for digital industries.
Yes.
Little bit, right? First step. And doing more of that and finding ways to get those Fuse machines and cloud factories doing more is really.
I could say a lot of things. I want to
sure
keep it for. I want to keep it for when they ring the bell. Let me just go ahead and say it there. No, Fuse machines is a fantastic, right? Amazing story. As soon as they go ahead and ring that bell, and then it's going to be
Exactly.
It's going to be fantastic for every Nepali
Exactly.
living here or abroad. That there is a possibility to have $1 billion company or anywhere in the world.
And I get contacted. It was really interesting. Just in the last week, I've been contacted by expatriate Nepalis who are living in Silicon Valley and working in Silicon Valley and making lots of money, who want to do things for Nepal and are asking, "Look, how can I get involved?" So Nepal also has. Part of the upside of having exported so many people is that you have people in these incredible industries, dynamic growth industries that are, I think, ready to contribute more to the country and make some of those investments actually to get those started. So digital's got to be a piece of the story.
A very good friend of mine, he's one of the co-founders for F1 Soft, the creators of PhonePe and eSewa. And I'll never forget what he said, and it's very similar to what you just said. So when we have multinational companies coming to Nepal, or when we have people who've worked abroad and coming to Nepal, we acquire the skills. And that is more valuable than anything else.
It's true. And that's why in both digital, but more broadly, foreign direct investment is something that the country needs to be more serious about. Foreign direct investment in the country last year was close to zero. And so I think that part of the policy challenge is making sure that people know that Nepal is serious about bringing in foreign investors in the energy space and in digital, in tourism, across the board. And I'm not so sure that right now that's the first priority of policymakers.
So let me be a little bit pessimist here. What's stopping them?
What's stopping them? I think if you're a foreign investor and you're looking at your options, do you choose Nepal over Sri Lanka, over Thailand, over Indonesia, over the Philippines? So there's stuff going on. I don't want to be pessimistic about it, but I think it's really important for policymakers to be looking around and saying, look, do we have the enabling environment to get people to want to invest here? Can we guarantee them that they're going to be able to get their money out when they decide they want to divest? Right? And right now, this is a country, and this has been a bedrock of the stability of the country. So I don't want any one of your listeners, I'll look at the camera and make sure nobody's thinking that I'm suggesting that you completely liberalize the capital account of the country. But, that certainty, that policy and regulatory certainty, that if I make a bet on Nepal and put my money in there, and then when I'm ready to pull it out, I'm not going to have a problem pulling my money out. This is really important. Many people don't realize that this is a country where it's not super easy to bring dollars in and out of the country. You need regulatory approvals from bureaucrats somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that that's an entirely bad thing, but do you have those challenges in Thailand? No, you don't. So, if you're really a country that is open for business, the market will know it and will respond.
Let me pick your brain on India's story. Once India decided to go ahead and open up, or let's jump to Singapore. Once Singapore decided to open up to the world.
Well, I am surely not an expert on the Singaporean or the Indian economy, and I'm going to be very careful with what I say about both of those. But this story of the Asian tigers that has transformed these economies in the last years is something remarkable. I was in Bangkok 2 weeks ago for some work things. And when you see, the economy that they have created built on, it's just incredible, right? And they've found a way to cater to every single niche of the tourist experience, whether you're there for sun and fun, or like me, whether you're a nerdy golfer and you want to go play golf, or whether you're there for shopping. It's really incredible. Now, I give this example all the time, and this is a bit controversial, right? Which is to say that if Nepal is on the European blacklist for air travel. You don't have any direct flights to Europe, and Nepali Airlines are not able to fly to Europe. Now, can you imagine what Thailand would do if they found themselves in that situation? They would fix the problem in 24 hours. They would find a way to do whatever it takes to get out of that situation. And here yet we have these challenges in civil aviation that are profound, and I think they're holding the country back. So I think that being really
that's one example that you're giving.
It's one example. It's just an example, right? But I do think that policymakers in the country need to think very, very. If you're going to think really hard about building that economy of the future, then you need to look at those issues and take some kind of drastic, costly, measures. And there's cost to them.
Well, there's going to be a lot of backlash generally, especially on this day and age. Anybody can go ahead and comment and write about how they feel instantly without thinking twice. I'm sure somebody's doing that right now.
I'm sure they're doing it right now. I've read, I've watched a whole bunch of your interviews with my colleagues, with Rob Fenn and with Veronique Lorenzo. And as much as I liked listening to the interviews, I very much enjoyed reading the comments. Everyone has a view, and that's the beautiful thing about this democracy, right? Let people have opinions. It's good. Voice them.
And again, that's why I'm saying a lot of people who are listening right now, especially the policymakers who are listening right now, maybe they really want reform, they really want the change, but there's a lot of things that's holding them back.
Sure. That's the challenge. That's why they get paid the big bucks, as we say in American. That's the challenge of leadership. I think that the challenge of leadership, and one that I think is really profound for Nepal, is not planning for the country of today, but planning for the country of tomorrow.
David, let me ask you a different question. What are your biggest challenges when you're leading such a big organization? What's your biggest challenge?
Well, before I talk about the challenge, let me just talk about the privilege and the honor. We have an incredibly close relationship with policymakers and with the government.
Yeah.
We're incredibly privileged to be able to be part of this journey that Nepal is taking right now. I really do think about it every day, just how fortunate we are at the World Bank to be not to be, some institution far away in Washington, but be true partners in the Nepali journey for kind of growth, prosperity, and poverty reduction. It's an amazing honor. The challenge is that it's a challenging place to work. I've worked in a lot of places, and it is on the one hand the most exciting place that I've ever been, in some ways one of the more challenging ones. Getting stuff done is challenging in Nepal. Getting those roads built, getting the infrastructure built it takes longer here than it should. I think we speak very openly and very openly about the challenges of simple things like getting the permission to cut down trees if you're widening a road. In Nepal, it can take you 2 years to get a tree cutting permit. After you've done your environmental assessment, it can take you 2 years to get a permit to cut down a tree. It's a small, silly little example. Or, the permit to move an electric pole if you're building a road can take ages. So I think that the challenge and opportunity for the country is actually is making some of that doing business stuff, both doing business with the private sector, but also doing business in the public sector, a little faster, a little more agile, and a little more fit for purpose for a 21st century where some of the neighbors have shown that you really can get that stuff done, and you can do it with appropriate safeguards to make sure that you're not causing environmental damage or causing social damage. So I think that's a bit of the challenge that we're facing in really trying to drive for results, which at the bank is so important.
Everybody wants instant results, but again,
everyone's impatient. But that's as we mentioned, there's the Instagram, the world of Instagram and social media is that you think it's you see the rosy side of everything everywhere, and you have to realize that the reality is a little different. But I think Nepalis are impatient, and I think it's acceptable. It's normal, right?
Again, it's been a decade that we've had the constitution, and we're one of the youngest democracies in the world.
It's a new country, exactly. It's a new country, and making this federal system work and making it sustainable is in some ways the fundamental challenge of the country, right? Making a federal, I'm from the United States. It's taken my country 300 years to figure out this federal thing, and we're still working on it. And it's still evolving and changing as the news shows of the last year. And so to imagine that a country that is a baby country, or at least a baby federal country, let's call it that, will do things instantly is it's not realistic. At the same time, I think this, as I mentioned, as we talked about before, this social media thing has accelerated the pressure to deliver results in a way that is a little bit unprecedented in human history.
Before I jump into one of my favorite topic and the favorite word called corruption, which I want it to be zero, 5 lakh, which is 500,000 Nepalese come into the market every single year. Every year. But we're providing 50,000 jobs, give or take. That 450,000 cap that we have. What does the future hold? So, what does the research say?
So, a couple things. So, the first is that it's not just 50,000. So, it's 50,000 jobs in the formal sector, but this is an economy that is dominated by informality. People working in mom and pop shops that are not registered. They're doing a little bit of this on the side. So, the economy is more dynamic than you make it sound with that number. But you're also reflecting a reality. It's what we talked about. People are leaving the country looking for opportunity. And that's just because there are not enough people willing to take that bet, make the investment, and try to make a business work in the country. And that's despite the fact that the banks are pretty flush with money. There's not a shortage of capital in the system to make productive investments. So again, and maybe repeating here a little bit, but mixing that sort of supply side, you can train people a lot, and there's been a lot of focus on training people. But if there's no uptake on if there's nowhere for them to get a job, it's like economists say, pushing on a string. You're pushing on the string by training them, but they're not being absorbed anywhere. So making sure that that environment in which people are really willing to take that entrepreneurial bet and create a business. And I think, as we started to talk about tourism, digital, in agribusiness, in the energy space a little bit, there's enormous opportunity in the country, and to a lesser extent in manufacturing. Right? You talked about manufacturing. I think it's the dream of a lot of Nepalis to see a stronger manufacturing base in the country, both for domestic, but also for export. To do that, you need a lot better infrastructure. Look, you lose 27% of agricultural production in transport in the country. So a quarter of the food that you produce gets ruined in transport because of the infrastructure. And that's both storage and roads, et cetera. So these are some of the things, and people know this. I'm not saying anything that's deeply profound. Your policymakers know this, that really if you want to make, for example, higher value agribusiness more of a productive piece of the economy, then you need to make some. We all need to make some of those investments happen in a faster way.
Directly working with. Let me straight this straight up. Let's say directly working with the top 5 banks or top 10 banks of the country. Would the World Bank be doing that down the road, straight up?
Well, first of all, we've been deeply involved in the financial sector for 15, 20 years, and again, another one of those success stories, right? We talk about community forestry a lot. We talked already about NEA and the energy sector reforms.
Agriculture, let's say.
But the banking sector, the financial sector reforms and stability that the country has achieved, and the dynamic banking sector is a fantastic success. It is a fantastic success. And again, we all want to be a little glass half empty, but look back 20 years and look at what the financial sector in the country was like, and you really have seen a tremendously rich, vibrant, and developed financial sector. There's more to do, of course, but this is a country that really has a well-functioning, well-regulated, very strong central bank that is doing a good job of regulating the banking sector. And so that's not the problem in Nepal is not a shortage of money to push into companies. It's a shortage of people who want to take out loans to make that next Fuse machines a reality, I think. And
make that next media company.
Exactly. I know a guy. I met a guy once.
Working on it. Again, media is changing, right? We were talking about that off the record earlier as well. It's changed in the U.S. too.
Amazing.
It's changed in the U.S. too.
Podcasters like you are changing the world. Amazing.
And we're very excited on this as well. David, a few things that I left out earlier was one word that I mentioned earlier as well. corruption. How does the World Bank navigate around it?
Look, I mean, in some ways, it's a very easy answer. In some ways, a very complicated answer. So the simple answer is we have a zero tolerance policy for corruption. So on operations that we finance, we have absolutely zero tolerance for it, and we have the systems in place to both ensure the procurement processes and also the financial management, the accounting, the auditing of our finance operations is absolutely spotless. Things happen, and we have a whole investigative arm that looks into those things, and multiple active investigations ongoing in the country right now. More broader, sort of taking one half a step back, trying to support the public financial management, such a nerdy and boring term, but public financial management and the institutions around public financial management is something that we've been deeply involved in, with great support from some of those bilateral donors that are so active and interested in the space. So countries like Switzerland and the UK and others that have been amazing partners in this, and being able to help us work on the things that maybe we otherwise wouldn't be able to work on. So building the capacity of the audit institutions, making sure that digital transactions, look, 99% of transactions in the federal system are now taking place digitally, right? 97% of wards are able to provide services digitally in a country as complex and partially remote as this. 97% of wards. So some real amazing transformation in that space. But I don't have to tell you, and you know, anyone who reads the newspaper, I read the English newspapers and a summary of the Nepali newspapers every day. Corruption is being talked about a lot in the country, and I think that it's something that the Nepali people are really concerned about, and I think that is pervasive in the political dialogue. You know, we're not involved obviously in the political dialogue, but you don't need to. But I live in the country, and so I read the newspapers and watch the media, and it's clearly a massive challenge for Nepal.
Again, I know you're not going to jump into it wholeheartedly, but just a bit. Political stability. Even when it comes to, let's say, two other countries, let's say Sri Lanka and Maldives as well. I'll touch base on that as well, just to get a perspective on it. That's the key?
Look, in my business, rather than talking about political stability, I would talk about the strength of institutions that live on beyond political changes. So making sure that you have strong ministries, strong institutions, strong agencies that can continue to operate despite changes at the top. So, one challenge that we faced in Nepal is the lack of a clear, fully federal civil service legal framework, and the constant kind of rotation of staff that we see in our agencies and ministries that we work with. Is a real challenge. Now, is that political? Is that institutional? I'm not really sure. But I think if you look at, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Sri Lanka has just gone through an incredible political transformation. I'm sure you know about it, right? I think that you've seen a kind of an emergence of a coalition, sort of a center-left coalition, but that has captured the kind of excitement and imagination of the Sri Lankan people throughout the whole country. They won basically the whole country, even in a place that's been traditionally very divided and has a complicated history of civil conflict, right? Working with them, one of the great sort of experiences of the last year has been able to sort of really deeply engage with them about how do you, on the one hand, pivot towards some new priorities that a different government with a different sort of political leaning has, but still maintain the fundamentals of economic stewardship and good governance, et cetera. So, and in their case, really bringing in that governance, anti-corruption, clean Sri Lanka element so much more clearly. So, we're surely, as the World Bank, we are, as I said, we're not going to comment on the political matters, but our job is to kind of try to work with the policymakers that the Nepali people elect to help them achieve their goals.
I like this. I like this word, clean Sri Lanka.
It's amazing. It's a really interesting concept. It's not perfect. They have not solved the problem, but they were elected very much, I think it's fair to say, on a strong anti-corruption platform. And they've really captured, I think, the imaginations, as I said, captured the imaginations of the Sri Lankan people that things can actually be different. Now, it is really challenging. And you can bring in a cadre of very, very excellent, let's say clean, non-corrupt people. But in the Sri Lankan case, those challenges are quite pervasive. They go down all the way down, through the system. So making progress on that and really showing progress is a great challenge for them.
A few projects that you'd like to emphasize on, that you'd like to go ahead and share. Let's start with education.
Look, education. Let's talk about the education. We've been deeply involved in education for a long time, but in recent years, in a really interesting kind of multi-donor, multi-partner approach. Let's start with the glass half full.
Sure.
Nepal's got now about 96% level of enrollment in primary education.
Yes.
It falls off pretty quickly when you get to secondary education, okay? But so amazing progress made. But the quality of education is a massive challenge. Learning poverty is high. The number of third graders who can't read or perform mathematics at grade level is too high in the country. So I think the great challenge moving forward, and we're a very, very small part of it at the World Bank, but is to find ways that in those services like health and education, that you actually start ramping up not just access, but really the quality of service. And so that's really the great challenge in the country. I mean, Nepal has again, back to the remittances thing, has found a kind of creative way around it through private education, right? So you have
private healthcare, same.
Exactly. So again, it's been from what? Remittances, money coming in, and that being able to actually, I can get my kid out of the school and put him into a private school or put her into a private school or provide healthcare in a private way. Is that sustainable? Look, we all want to see public-private participation. We want to see a lot more private participation, we think, in service delivery, but making sure that the public sector also can raise to the challenge of delivering services in really a sustainable and impactful way is a bit of the challenge there.
So education, I'm going to go ahead and say that definitely we're working on education, not just in my thing, David, this is my thing. I want to be, I've seen the American system, how it's done, where school system it's equal for everybody.
You think so?
You have private schools too?
We have a tremendous challenge. I mean, look, I'm not here.
You have challenges too.
I don't want to comment on the United States. I'm surely not an elected official or paid to comment on the United States, but I'll speak this as an American at least half American. I've got another passport too, but it's an American. The American education system is based on property taxes. And so people that live in rich districts get often get a higher quality of education than people who are living in underserved, poor districts. We have a highly federal system. Again, it's neither good nor bad, but I mean, there is no perfect system for this. But being able, I think what we try to do at the World Bank is try to bring data-driven, information-driven policy, policies to the forefront. So does the American system work? It works pretty well. It works very well for certain people. It works less well if you're in an inner city school or if you're in a rural school that has a very low tax base. And there's a lot of discussion on this in my country. I'm surely not going to comment on it or opine politically, but I think making kind of informed, data-driven, information-driven decisions about how you want to provide public services is a massive challenge. In Nepal, the federal system is not fully functioning yet. It's making some major progress in a decade, right? But it's not fully functioning yet. And so figuring out, doing more to both define roles and responsibilities, to devolve and deconcentrate more responsibility to local levels, to make sure that they have the resources to deliver in the education space, in the health space, in roads, in water and sanitation, in solid waste management, et cetera, is part of the challenge of the next decade, right?
For me, the building block is education. I'll jump into that. Building block for a human being is education. You have education, you have healthcare, you're taken care of. At least half your problems are solved.
Not to repeat, but we need to find a way to keep those educated kids in the country. We need to find a way that they actually want to stay in Nepal and make a life here rather than feeling that they need to go off to Australia or the Gulf, I think.
Yesterday, I was watching a clip. A clip. This is completely something slightly different. A friend of mine is a very famous vlogger in Nepal. He's in Australia for a show, and then he was speaking to friends in, young Nepalese who came to his show, and he was sharing, I understand the frustration that you have, but I want to thank you for supporting, because it's because of your remittance that the country is running. Exactly. When he said that, as he was saying that, as soon as he finished what he said, I could hear the cheers.
It's true. And this is why I really wanted to be very nuanced with what I said before.
I know.
The remittance economy has been a lifesaver. It has been the driver of poverty reduction. It's been the driver of growth. This is a country that grows on average at 4.5% over the last 15 years.
We're going to try to go ahead and keep it that or increase it, hopefully.
I think that's the challenge, right? So look at Vietnam and look at Nepal. These are countries that had, when I started working in this business, in this amazing life that I've had to live at the World Bank 30 years ago, Vietnam and Nepal had basically around similar GDP per capita. But Nepal has grown on average 4.5%, and Vietnam is growing, at 7%. And that doesn't make a huge difference in 1 year, but over time it makes a tremendous difference in where you go. And so this impatience that we talked about, 7% growth today would be a lot better than 7% growth next year or the year after. And so finding ways to actually get more quickly to that, the double-digit growth that everybody dreams of in Nepal is really the priority. And that's a bit why I mentioned before the digital economy. So you mentioned the Rani Jamara irrigation scheme, which we're really proud of and is amazing. We've just doubled down on it by putting more money into this. And I think that making more investments in irrigation, I think particularly in the east of the country, is things that we're really looking into over the next years. But that stuff's going to take years. It takes time to build that infrastructure to unlock the agricultural potential. But, the next incessant rain or the next fuse machines can come up very, very quickly. And so I think that really being thoughtful about promoting fast developing private sector growth models is something that's really important in the country.
I was reading up on the report as well. So what's the next coming decade like? What kind of growth do you think we're going to see?
Oh gosh, I mean, look, you never ask an economist to look again. And I mentioned this publicly recently. I've spent a big chunk of my career working in Latin America. Very different context, right? But today, Colombia, Mexico would do anything for 4.5% growth. Okay, there would be champagne flowing everywhere in many of the Latin American countries if you could get to the kind of growth rates that Nepal is lamenting and saying, oh, we're not at 7, we're not at 8, we're not at that 10. So let's again take a bit of a glass half full view on it. Now, it's a different sort of moment in the development trajectory of Nepal versus Colombia. But 4.5% growth is impressive. Or 5% growth is impressive. It's the question of how do you really leapfrog if you want to get to that kind of escape velocity, right? If you think about, escape velocity to make it to the upper middle income status, the country needs to find a way to unlock more private investment, to make the public investment that it's doing right now work better. Nepal executed less than 60% of its allocated capital budget last year, and I think this year's on track to be something similar, I think. Making sure that, you're spending the public dollars, public rupees. The public money is getting spent, getting invested in productive stuff, that infrastructure, those roads, those water and sanitation systems, et cetera. That's the great challenge, I think.
From our conversation, what I've understood slightly is we're leaning more towards things that are going to be catalyst, which is like the digital economy, which is going to be catalyst, which is going to again add that fuel to the fire of our growth right away, and World Bank's leaning slightly more towards that as well.
Yeah, it's true. But there's no magic bullet. There's no single solution, right? So digital, yes. Tourism, yes. Agribusiness, absolutely. Okay. Manufacturing at the margins, yes. Hydropower, if we can get some more of this hydropower built and some more of those electrons exported across the border, particularly both for domestic use, but especially across the border. Look, hydropower is not going to create massive number of jobs. It's going to create some jobs in the construction phase. But what it will bring is a lot more resources into the country that can be used for making those productive infrastructure investments that maybe get you closer to a virtuous cycle of export of electrons and investment in infrastructure.
And again, if you're very lucky, then the gas and petrol. If you go ahead and find that, why not?
There seems to be some stuff going on in that space. I'm not fully informed, but I'm reading the same newspaper articles that you are. So looking forward to learning more about that.
Both of us are on that. Have you, by the way, this is a different question. Have you traveled all across the 7 provinces, or you plan to?
You are touching on my Achilles heel. So one of the greatest challenges of my first year here has been the demands of traveling to Sri Lanka, Maldives, and back to headquarters a few times too much. So I've had a chance to travel in the country. Was recently in Lumbini, where we're looking at making a really exciting program of investment in Lumbini, but and have been obviously to a few other places, but seeing more of the country. I'm looking at the map on your wall. Your viewers can't see it, but there's a beautiful wooden map of Nepal on the wall. I'm thinking about all the places that I want to go. So that will really be the challenge for the next year, is to get out from the far west to the far east.
We're going to do motorcycle trips.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. We're definitely going to do that. We touched base on a lot of things. Again, there are a few things that I let go of today, because we're definitely going to talk about it on our next sitting as well, because I've realized this is not the first time we're going to be sitting, David, and the friendship's going to last for a lifetime.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the love. Thank you so much for the love. And anything you want to say to I have a lot of young viewers watching from all around the world.
Let's get together. Would love to hear. Would really love. I mean, at the World Bank, again, we're a development partner of Nepal, not the government, but of the country. And engaging with civil society, with the youth, with women, with people from different communities and different backgrounds is something that we think is not just something that we're interested in, but it is really helpful, critical to understand the development challenges of the country. So the more we talk, the better. I really look forward to coming back again, talking to you, meeting some of your viewers sometime, and really thank you again.
Dan, thank you so much. And again, from the bottom of my heart, do more. And again, we're going to do fun things together and uplift everybody. That's the whole idea.
Keep the rubber down, as they say. Keep those tires on the ground.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
Again. All right.